Welcome in. Game Time Decisions. We are live with you on a Thursday night, 1 week away from the NFL Draft. I'm Kevin Walsh here on Game Time Decisions across the SportsGrid network. A week from tonight, we will be live in studio coverage for round one of the NFL Draft. You will see Adam Kaplan here tonight and next week. You'll see Mike Blewett here tonight and next week, along with Ben Stevens, Joe Lisi, and Warren Sharp and myself, all set for round number one next week, which is supposed to start with Caleb Williams going to the Chicago Bears. And the intrigue is starting to pick up for what will happen beyond that point. We'll talk to you about some of that odds movement. We'll talk in 10 minutes to Brady Cannon about the RBC Heritage. A lot of big names at the top of the odds board. JT Poston at the top of the leaderboard right now, 8 under. Aberg, McElroy, two guys that I lined up before this tournament began. We'll check in with them. We'll check in with the pre-tournament favorite as well, Scotty Scheffler. We have no NBA tonight because tomorrow we'll close out the play-in, and unfortunately, we will not be breaking down Jimmy Butler props. Before we open everything up, we'll start with the Jimmy Butler news. Look, Jimmy B plays likely through a tear in the MCL for almost 3 full quarters against the Philadelphia 76ers last night. It continues to speak to Jimmy's toughness, the degree to which he embodies Heat culture. It is a very real thing. But this is a disaster. There is no other way to slice it for the Miami Heat as we get set to bring our radio audience in live right here on SportsGrid Radio, Sirius XM Channel 159. Kevin Walsh with you on Game Time Decisions this Thursday night. Jimmy Butler's absence means two things. Firstly, it means Miami lost last night to Philly. That might have not happened had Jimmy been able to finish out that basketball game. Secondly, and obviously finish it out fully healthy. Secondly, it means Miami's now in a dangerous spot tomorrow against the Chicago Bulls. The Heat are home. They're slight favorites, but slight, as opposed to comfortable favorites. They're 13-9 this season without Jimmy Butler, which is a winning record, but hardly dominant. And this is, of course, supposed to be playoff Jimmy's time of year. Third, and perhaps most important, the Boston Celtics now, when they look across the aisle, will either get a Chicago Bulls team that they should absolutely smash, or a Miami Heat team that will be without their top man. The Celtics were winners in this situation. It is unfortunate. It is a shame. Not getting another dose of Celtics Heat in the Eastern Conference playoffs is an absolute shame. But it's the reality of things, and it moves the markets here, and we'll talk more about that as we open it up. We look at the results from the Thursday Eastern Conference play-in games, and it was Philly closing it out 105-104. The game miraculously sneaks over the total. Of course, Miami covering that 5-point line there. Joel Embiid did enough, but Joel Embiid was not great. 23 points in that basketball game, dominated the glass, certainly. But for the Sixers, their fans and backers, this performance against Miami does not spring a world of confidence. The Knicks already were a tough matchup for them. I think Philly would have much preferred round one matchups with Milwaukee, especially the Giannis injury factoring in, or even Cleveland. But at the end of the day, the Sixers probably felt to themselves, it's all good. Roll the ball out. We've got Embiid. Last night, was that Embiid playoff struggles? Was that Embiid's health? Either one is not good news. A light line, though, either direction right now. We've seen Philly a favorite in the market early on for their series against the New York Knicks. So that is also, of course, an important piece of this puzzle. Matchups and everything. The Knicks did not get an easy draw here as the 2 seed. We'll continue to break down and evaluate that series. Chicago finishes out Atlanta. We'll talk about those play-in games for the Hawks. Last game, Trae Young plays in an ATL jersey. Most likely, the expectations, San Antonio and the LA Lakers will be involved. I'll say this. Getting a player like Trae Young with Victor Wembanyama can only take Wemby to another level. Also, by next year, Wemby will be unquestionably better than Trae Young, ranked ahead of Trae Young, more expectations than Trae Young. First time in his career, Trae Young will be the second guy on his roster. I think that's more exciting than people suggest. But for the Lakers, the fact that they could bring in another all-star with AD and LeBron, something they've never had during that duo's run, is interesting. But what type of moves the Lakers make will likely depend on their round one series against the Denver Nuggets. Let's drop this down to the bracket and look at where everything sits right now, because we are only waiting on the 1-8 matchups to be set. OKC will get the winner of Sacramento and New Orleans, and then Boston gets the winner of Chicago and Miami. The Knicks get, of course, the Sixers. The Nuggets get the Lakers. We've seen continuing movement, by the way, with Dallas growing stronger, despite the idea is Kawhi will be in the mix, and Indiana growing stronger because of the lack of confidence that Giannis will be available early on in that series, giving you your eyes on the play-in games, which will, of course, be the big games for tomorrow. Miami down to a 1.5-point favorite here, of course, feeling the impact of the Jimmy absence, and Sacramento flipping to a slight road favorite because we can't have nice things. The Pelicans feeling the impact of, unfortunately, the Zion Williamson injury that will keep him out of that game, which again also speaks to the help that does for Oklahoma City, knowing whomever they see in round number one will be dealing with injuries. Sacramento on the back end, and then New Orleans without Zion potentially for a few games, maybe the length of that series. We'll shoot this over to the NHL quickly here. It is the final night of NHL regular season action. Don't forget, download that SportsGrid app to stay up to date with all the latest news, injury analysis, and information that you need to make those bets. Avs Oilers should be a fun one to break down. We've got a lot of the NHL series also already set. We'll talk to Joe Madden in just a bit here, get her thoughts on some of those series as well as tonight's action. Shooting this over quickly, the number 2 pick. We talk about this at the top, but the movement is beginning. Every year, as we get closer to the NFL draft, there starts to be this shift in odds that leave people a bit stunned. That's obviously not going to happen at the first overall pick. Caleb is going 1. He can buy the house in the Windy City now. It could happen at 2, and it's starting to happen. Jaden Daniels, less than 48 hours ago, was minus 330 to go second overall, a.k.a. to the Commanders. That number down to minus 210. It's down to minus 160 at other shops. That movement is real, and of course it has a domino effect throughout the rest of the draft, potentially including Washington wide receiver Rome Odunze. Let's put a quick pick on the board. Give me the Washington wideout over the 8.5 draft position. He's comfortably going behind Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors. If we're sending 4 quarterbacks inside this top 8, we've got 2 wide receivers. We've got Joe Alt. Only one more spot there for Rome. I don't think he cracks that top 8. We're talking RBC with Brady Cannon next.
Talked about the Ohtani story. This interpreter, Ipe, clearly was a problem gambler. I mean, he would be identified as that and beyond. Now, there are a lot of others that are out there.
The timing didn't seem great. It seemed slightly tone deaf in terms of, maybe now isn't the time to say it. But the sentiment itself, you have to agree with. There's only so much a sports betting company can do, right?
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Throwbacks in white have now become the main uniforms in black and green as well. 4-game green.
Your contracts will be higher in 5 years because the ratings will be through the roof, people. Listen to me. Play games at 7 o'clock. Get more ratings. Make more money. It's simple, but somehow they're imbeciles that make this playoff schedule. I can't figure it out.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
It's when he swung it easy at three-quarter golf swings, and he pretty much hit his number all the time. Dude, but when he hit something full, he hit it 20 yards over the greens at times. He was like, what are you doing?
He's just smiley, happy, and a freakish athlete golf robot that's going to be right there winning majors for the next 10-plus years. It's amazing.
Did you say he was smiling or smiley?
Only on SportsGrid.
They're still the best. They're still the champs. Everyone wants to crown the Celtics the champions, but that's not the way it works. They got to beat them. And, they got to get through the East, which isn't going to be fun to begin with. Everyone thinks it's so automatic.
If it's just Boris is kind of losing his power, if whatever his tactics have been, move on.
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid. Live on SportsGrid, Game Time Decisions, joined now by Brady Cannon as we get set to talk a little RBC heritage here. And we set this tournament up a little bit on Monday as we closed out the Masters and looked at the top of this board and, who could potentially go out here and go low. We did not bring up JT Poston in that breakdown, and that's who we have right now at 8 under, 2 shots better than anybody else, Brady. What are you seeing here from the opening round at the RBC?
Well, it doesn't really surprise me out of JT Poston. He plays out of St. Simon's Island, Georgia, the Sea Island area, as a number of tour professionals do. So he's familiar with this part of the country, the Bermuda surfaces, these coastal courses. And he started off this season fantastic. And then he fell off a little bit. And now, maybe it was just this type of course, kind of feeling at home somewhat. That needed to spark him. He actually made my list about, my top 10, top 12 guys on my list. He was one of them. I didn't end up putting him on my card, but he is on that list. Now, he went so low today, shot a 63. I don't know if he can sustain that. I wouldn't be surprised if he shot something around even par, maybe 1 under on Friday. Approach play was fantastic. 4th in this field for strokes gained approach, 2nd in putting. But off the tee, it was a little bit squirrely. 46th in this field for strokes gained off the tee. A couple other guys that made my list I talked about, and one of them made my card, was Russell Henley. I did play Russell Henley this week at 38-1. A couple other guys that made that list, but I didn't play, were Cameron Young and Ludwig Åberg. Now, Henley, I really like the way he has started, Kevin. He's 4 under par. Strokes gained off the tee, he's 5th in the field. Approach play, he's 2nd. But putting, he's 59th. So if the putter just gets a little bit better and everything else stays the same, this guy's in a really good spot. And very similar for Cameron Young. He is currently at 20-1, but prior to the tournament, he was about 30-1. Strokes gained off the tee, he's 21st. Strokes gained approach, he's 3rd. And with the putter, 45th. And he has been much improved with the putter the last couple of weeks at the Masters and the week before in his last start. So it looks like the putter could be coming around. And again, if it improves for him, he's in a real good spot to move up further on that leaderboard. And then finally, Åberg, the new sensation, right? He played a beautiful round today. Number 1 in this field in strokes gained off the tee, 15th for approach, 27th for putting, which is very good and could be a little bit better. We know he's a great putter. And then strokes gained around the green, 57th. And you wonder if that'll come back to bite him. That's really the one weak point in his game. And we saw that at Augusta. You know, the whole world that tuned into the Masters was able to watch this guy play, you know, close to 36 holes of golf on TV. And the mistakes that you saw him make were the little chip shots around the green. So he's going to have to get better there. Everything else is firing. The price is probably a little bit too short on him right now at plus 650, but I think he's certainly going to be there. The one other guy that I stayed away from entirely, he didn't make my list, what have you, Colin Morikawa. Great round today, kind of picked up where he left off at the Masters. He is 12th in strokes gained off the tee, 6th on approach, 12th in putting, and 19th around the green. So those 4 guys right there, if you're not involved yet, if you didn't get involved pre-tournament, and you want to dabble a little bit after just one round, Morikawa, Oberg, Cameron Young, and Russell Henley would be my 4 guys. Personally, I'll probably wait until after tomorrow before I dive in maybe with some in-game stuff.
Get to, as you call it, halftime of this tournament. I think that certainly makes sense. I mentioned to you, the 2 guys that I played before we got going here were Ludwig and Rory, and you gave the Ludwig breakdown. The thing for me with Rory is one of the things that really stood out to me, and I'm probably one of the very few, is just Rory's Sunday round score prop, right? You and I talked about it a little bit, was that it was the lowest of anybody. And it's just kind of the reminder that but Rory right around Masters time is maybe when we get the most negative talk around him, because everybody's like, he's never going to win this. He's useless, and what have you. And I wonder if, can you sneak out a tick of a better number on Rory than you're supposed to get? And also because Rory didn't have that lighted up round on Sunday, maybe it's in him somewhere. And I got to tell you, Brady, when he was 3 under through 5 holes with that eagle, incredibly playing with Ludwig and matched by him exactly, I thought, oh, here we go. Rory is going to challenge for this round lead. Rory had to put together a perfect final 2 holes, birdieing both, just to get to 4 under. I'm curious what you think about McIlroy, who really faded in the background last week at Augusta, here at the RBC through 1.
A couple of great putts and a couple of great iron shots on those last 2 holes to get him to 4 under, and it's a solid first round. He's number 1 in this field for strokes gained around the green, 15th for putting, but other than those 2 strokes on 17 and 18, his approach play is nearly dead last in this field. Strokes gained approach, he ranks 62nd. So the irons are not really firing for Rory, but it also tells you he must have done something pretty well to get to 4 under par if the irons aren't really firing. So, you would expect the iron play to improve for Rory. Maybe the putting will dip a little bit. That's probably a little bit atypical for him to be that good with the flat stick, and maybe around the greens as well. But if he's going to contend here, he has to improve on the approach play, Kevin. That's probably one of the premier skill sets that you need around this golf course. It's a very crowded, congested, short track. You've got to be accurate off the tee. You got to dial in the irons, and then you got to scramble and make a few putts. He's doing the scrambling. He's doing the putting, but the irons need to catch up.
And then the last person I certainly want to make sure we have time to mention is Scottie Scheffler. Pre-tournament, 4-1 plus 450. We're double that at 9-1 now. And, pulling up the statistics here, there's that putter. Right? And again, Scottie to me still to some degree an enigma, because the best golfer, he's been the best golfer in the world now for some time. But the difference has been, the putter's been good. He was able to be the best golfer in the world while basically not being all that good at putting. It's one round, but that is a bit worrisome sign for anybody that bet him under 5-1 to win this tournament.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And his odds are probably pretty darn short right now. Even at 9-1, he's 6 shots off the pace. And one thing we have to remember here, This is a no-cut event. So, it's not like some of these guys are going to play 36 holes and go home. They are going to get 4 full days with a crack at it, and that's probably more power to Scottie Scheffler. But going into this tournament, I wondered about 2 things. When he started the Masters, what I heard is that his wife's due date for their first child was 3 weeks away. Well, obviously now that's 2 weeks away. So, that window has closed and the possibility of it happening becomes greater. So he's got that on his mind. The other thing is he just won the Masters. And I think it's very difficult to come off of that pedestal and then perform at a high level once again. Maybe this was his worst. Maybe he's due for better things here going forward the next 3 days. But I think he could stumble a little bit, if not for the entire tournament. But I really don't think he's going to get to the winner's circle for a second straight week. And as soon as I say that, you have to remind yourself, this is Scottie Scheffler, and he's on an absolute tear. But you talked about the putter. You talked about Rory being nearly dead last on approach. Scottie nearly dead last in this field, 63rd in strokes gained putting, and also around the greens, 46th. Now, the approach play is 6th in this field, and off the tee is 7th. So that part of the game's perfect. He needs to get the short game going if he's going to move up this board.
He is minus 125 for a top 10. I am sure there will be some people who look to kind of chase that number just because of who he is. I will say, I was watching a bit of the coverage today, and he lipped out, 13, 14, and he looked at his caddy and laughed. A laugh that only someone coming off of a Masters win could muster up in that moment. Brady, appreciate it. We'll talk this weekend. Joe Madden and the NHL breakdowns are next.
Talked about the Otani story. This interpreter, Ipe, clearly was a problem gambler. I mean, he would be identified as that and beyond. Now, there are a lot of others that are out there.
The timing didn't seem great. It seemed slightly tone deaf in terms of, maybe now isn't the time to say it. But the sentiment itself, you have to agree with. There's only so much a sports betting company can do, right?
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Throwbacks in white have now become the main uniforms in black and green as well. 4-game green.
Your contracts will be higher in 5 years because the ratings will be through the roof, people. Listen to me. Play games at 7 o'clock. Get more ratings. Make more money. It's simple, but somehow they're imbeciles that make this playoff schedule. I can't figure it out.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
It's when he swung it easy at 3/4 golf swings, and he pretty much hit his number all the time. Dude, but when he hit something full, he hit it 20 yards over the greens at times. He was like, what are you doing?
He's just smiley, happy, and a freakish athlete golf robot that's going to be right there winning majors for the next 10-plus years. It's amazing.
Did you say he was smiling or smiley?
Only on SportsGrid.
They're still the best. They're still the champs. Everyone wants to crown the Celtics the champions, but that's not the way it works. They got to beat them. And, they got to get through the East, which isn't going to be fun to begin with. Everyone thinks it's so automatic.
If it's just Boris is kind of losing his power, if whatever his tactics have been, move on.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid. All right, we're back with you right here on SportsGrid. I'm Kevin Walsh on this Thursday night Game Time Decisions live on SportsGrid. Talking to Joe Madden now with the NHL's regular season finale up on deck tonight. Joe, before we get to tonight's slate, curious if anything from yesterday's set of games, of course, the past 2 days have had so many important matchups, but if anything from yesterday really stood out to you.
Well, we have to say hats off to Nikita Kucherov for being able to get that 100th assist. But I don't know if you watched it, Kevin. It was kind of heartbreaking to see Austin Matthews on the bench watching that happen and then realizing he still hadn't had his 70th goal and he wasn't able to get it last night. So history wasn't made for Austin Matthews out there, and his goals in overtime won't count. It was regular season goals. So he was held to that 69, a new target that he'll definitely be looking to hit next season. Looking at the Arizona Coyotes, I tell you that Mullet Arena, although it's small, it was just electric last night. Seeing the Arizona Coyotes finish as the Arizona Coyotes with a huge win for their fans over the Edmonton Oilers was absolutely breathtaking. I don't know if you heard those chants. They were saying Utah sucks in the stands. Obviously, the fans really emotional to see their team leaving the city. But fantastic night out there across the ice. You know, the Dallas Stars stressed us out. They wanted to have the most points in the Western Conference. They pushed it to overtime with the St. Louis Blues and were able to get the win. Now that solidified them in that first spot in the Western Conference, which means Vancouver doesn't have as much to play for tonight. So some impacts into tonight's games as well, Kevin.
Yeah, and from what I understand, we know who will be in the playoffs, but the matchups still potentially up for grabs, Joe. But that makes tonight potentially tricky waters. Motivations are not going to be all even across the board, and I'm sure that'll factor into some of your breakdowns. Let's start with this Winnipeg-Vancouver matchup here. The Jets, a home dog against the Canucks. What do you like in this one?
Okay, looking at this, we've got to look at the goaltending matchup. Demko will be in net for the Vancouver Canucks. The question mark for me is how long will they leave Demko in? I'm expecting him to be out there a limited time on the ice, and then we're going to see Boussoit in net for the Winnipeg Jets. I'm expecting Boussoit to stay in the whole time. We know he is a backup goalie to Connor Hellebuck. He has a save shots on goal prop tonight of 25.5 into the over at -122. I'm going to hit that, Kevin, because I expect him in for the full game. What we're going to see, I believe, out of these two teams is we might see their core players out for the first period and giving some effort, but I expect after that them to run their deeper lines and to get those players more playtime, working on the areas that they need improvement going into the playoffs. So I do think this one, you look at this game to stay under that total with the goaltending in, even when Demko leaves and Casey DeSmith steps in. Casey DeSmith needs to come out, needs to build that confidence as well, and I do think defenses play a role in this game more so than offensively. With the goal scoring, I think the offenses still get the shots, but with the goaltending, I'm willing to take this one under the 5.5, Kevin.
All right, now, Joe, the game that's going to jump off to people when they see the two teams is Colorado and Edmonton. How important, if at all, is this game tonight? And how are you going to approach the Oilers right now at around +170 as a moneyline dog?
Okay, so when we look at this, the only thing that will be impactful here is whoever gets the win will have the higher seed if they meet up in the Western Conference Finals. So I do think both of these teams would love to get the win, but with what we've seen out of Edmonton in those last couple of games, they really didn't push to take the Pacific when they could have pushed to take the Pacific from the Vancouver Canucks. So I don't think the motivation is there for Edmonton. Edmonton's playing a game plan, in my opinion, that is just stay healthy to get into the playoffs. When we look at the Colorado Avalanche here, they are at home. They're the favorite and they're in front of their home crowd. I think they do enough to be able to get the win, but I do think you've got to be cautious here, especially if you're looking at player props, because I don't know how long we will see those top lines out there on the ice. We know Nathan McKinnon isn't going to catch Nikita Kucherov, so I'm staying off his 2+ points tonight. This has been a prop that we've been betting for the last couple weeks of the season, but I can't get there. I do think you could look at him maybe for that anytime goal to come out and get a goal quick and then spend the later half of this game off the ice. So this game under 6.5 is where I have to go, Kevin. I know that we've got the backup goaltending in for Colorado, but I just don't see that big offensive push. You got to remember Edmonton's on the second night of a back-to-back. They only were able to score 2 goals last night on the Arizona Coyotes. So I think this is a lower scoring one, slower paced game out there. No one wants to get hurt right before going into the playoffs.
I am, by the way, a note, matchups will be interesting. You can expect me to be more involved when we get to these NHL playoffs, betting-wise. But the fact that McDavid was completely removed from the MVP conversation, fair or not, athletes are irrational. It makes me interested in Edmonton come postseason time. Just an extra bit of motivation for what is still the game's best player. I saw today a publication ranked the best players heading into the playoffs, and it said McDavid not one. I said, ooh, that's a mistake. He's still Connor McDavid. Joe, talk to me about this Vegas game here up against the Anaheim Ducks, the Golden Knights, nearly minus 400 on the money line.
It's a terrible number, right, Kevin? There's no way to get to it.
Yeah.
Even taking that puck line, you would have to take alt puck lines here to be able to get value. I do think, though, in the first period is where you're going to find the value with the Vegas Golden Knights. Their puck line laying a half goal in the first period is coming in at minus 104. But I also do think if you're searching for some plus money in this one, I really do expect the Vegas Golden Knights to come out strong in that first period. Hit Dostal in goal for the Anaheim Ducks, who he's been weak this season. Get those 2 goals. They have a team total of 1.5 in the first period, the over 1.5 in that first period, coming in at plus 188. And I do think they have every opportunity of doing so. Now, I don't like their full game total to the over because I can see a situation where they come out, they get those goals fast in the first period, and they absolutely lock down. I just don't see the Anaheim Ducks showing up in this game to be where we have to worry about it. But if that happens, it's really going to affect what we see in the later game. So looking at that later game, Kevin, I'm going to have some live betting situations based on the final outcome of this one between the Ducks and Vegas. Just give me Vegas in the first period, puck line and their team total over the 1.5.
Yeah, that parlay tonight of Vegas and LA is minus 174. So people are going to have to look to add another team, probably, if they are trying to parlay these big favorites and trust their result tonight. What are you going to do then, Joe, with the LA game? They are over minus 400 on the money line against the Chicago Blackhawks.
Okay, this game kicks off, Kevin, 30 minutes after the other game does. The Vegas Golden Knights are 1 point ahead of the LA Kings in that third spot in the Pacific. If Vegas wins tonight, the Kings don't move anywhere. I do think the Kings come out aggressive in the first period, but by the time the third period comes around, they're going to know if Vegas won. If Vegas won coming into the third period, the LA Kings have nothing left to play for. They're not going to move out of that wild card spot. If Vegas loses, though, I could see them getting the win in this game. So this is the live betting situation that I was talking about prior. I'm going to look at the Kings coming out in the first period. I'm going to take them in that first period on the puck line, just laying the half a goal at minus 102. But if Vegas loses tonight, what I'm going to be doing is, if Vegas wins tonight, I do think the LA Kings have a possibility of losing this game with the Chicago Blackhawks coming in hard in that third period, where the Kings end up playing their deeper players, don't want to take the risk of injury out there. So I will be coming back in on the Chicago Blackhawks plus the 2.5 or the 3.5 on that puck line with a tiny sprinkle on that money line, as well as I do think they have every opportunity. I think the Kings will give up if Vegas wins. So Kempe for the anytime goal I would be looking at as well for the LA Kings. He's been absolute fire out there. You could also circle Kopitar. But if it is a situation where Vegas loses their game, I think the Kings win. But if Vegas wins, then you could look at Connor Bedard going into that third period for an anytime goal as well. I do think there's a couple different ways it could play out.
Whenever we get to the finale of any league's regular season, always keep your eyes on the live board. Joe, I know you're going to be interested in that Marlins-Cubs game. Weather took that away from us. We do have one late baseball game, though, out in the Bay. The Giants and the Diamondbacks, little NL West action. Before we let you go, what are you doing with the lone baseball game left?
I'm going to look at this one to be under that total of 7.5. Ryan Nelson coming out here for the Arizona Diamondbacks. And while he's had a rough start in his 2 starts out there, I do think we can get more out of him in this one. When we look at Logan Webb, I have a lot of faith in Logan Webb coming out nice and strong. We know how phenomenally strong he was at home, especially last season. He had a 2.26 ERA at home. He started off strong again this season at home. And we look at the Diamondbacks here, and I do think both of these teams will really be limited versus the pitching matchup. So the under 7.5, I have faith in the bullpens. This will be a lower scoring game for me here, Kevin.
All right, looking for some low-scoring action late night out west. Joe, appreciate it. And again, I know the next time that you and I talk will be Saturday, and we will have playoff hockey, which is everyone's favorite. Joe, looking forward to it.
Oh, I'm so excited, Kevin. Can hardly wait. It's going to be some fireworks. So all the best to everyone.
Absolutely.
Tonight.
Best of luck there again with those picks. Coming up next, we're going to the NFL draft. We've got some odds movement, and I want to expand a little bit on the quick pick. The Ramadunze, over 8.5 draft position. This is an offensive draft. There may not be a defensive player selected inside the top 10 of this draft. Is that going to be the case? We'll break it down next, right here on SportsGrid.
Talked about the Otani story. This interpreter, Ipe, clearly was a problem gambler. I mean, he would be identified as that and beyond. Now, there are a lot of others that are out there.
The timing didn't seem great. It seemed slightly tone deaf in terms of, maybe now isn't the time to say it. But the sentiment itself, you have to agree with. There's only so much a sports betting company can do, right?
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Throwbacks in white have now become the main uniforms in black and green as well. 4-game green.
Your contracts will be higher in 5 years because the ratings will be through the roof, people. Listen to me. Play games at 7 o'clock. Get more ratings. Make more money. It's simple, but somehow they're imbeciles that make this playoff schedule. I can't figure it out.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
It's when he swung it easy at 3/4 golf swings, and he pretty much hit his number all the time. Dude, but when he hit something full, he hit it 20 yards over the greens at times. He was like, what are you doing?
He's just smiley, happy, and a freakish athlete golf robot that's going to be right there winning majors for the next 10-plus years. It's amazing.
Did you say he was smiling or smiley?
Only on SportsGrid.
They're still the best. They're still the champs. Everyone wants to crown the Celtics the champions, but that's not the way it works. They got to beat them. And, they got to get through the East, which isn't going to be fun to begin with. Everyone thinks it's so automatic.
If it's just Boris is kind of losing his power, if whatever his tactics have been, yeah, move on.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid. Back with you right here on Game Time Decisions. Tonight is not robust with games. NBA is off. Baseball has just one left, and that's not for another 3 hours. We will get you the MLB Play of the Day / Best Bet. Appreciate Joe and Brady helping us with the action you can really get in on, which is tonight's NHL. And then if you want to, grab some RBC as well. We'll check in with any of this for you, of course, here on Game Time Decisions. But we are a week away from the NFL Draft. And draft betting, you can do whatever you want, right? I'm sure there's a number of you out there that already have 3, 4, 5 different bets in on the NFL Draft. Some probably trying to be patient and wait for the swing in the market. And today is an appropriate time for us to really dial in because one of the first big swings happened today. Let's get to the second overall pick odds. So initially, to pull the curtain back, today we wanted to talk draft, of course, regardless, being a week out. We were going to talk about the strength in the Jaden Daniels number. That this prop that was initially, when very, very first posted on early in this process, that had Drake May as the favorite, was now seeing Jaden Daniels creep over minus 300. In the last 48 hours, Jaden Daniels is down to minus 210. Now, one important thing when you look at the second overall pick odds is it seems to only be a battle between Daniels and May. J.J. McCarthy has received a lot of buzz, but as you kind of look through the odds movement that we have seen throughout this process, at no point has J.J. McCarthy ever crept into a number where he looks like a major threat. Yes, going from 75 down to now the current 26-1 number is a big move, and anybody that bet those 75s did a great job beating the number, but that does not look like a cashable ticket. That is at the end of the day, what are you, if you, now maybe you have that JJ number and you think you can work off some other things, okay, sure. But it doesn't look like it's going to be McCarthy. Again, Drake May was initially the favorite. About a month or so ago, was still the favorite, and it's flipped. But it is important to note that, it's from the past month or so, Jaden's become the favorite. But just 2 days ago, this was looking like it was going to be Jaden Daniels. And we can take this right into the third overall pick conversation here, because the market right now, which is seeing this push now back towards Drake May, Daniels is still the favorite, is going to have this ripple effect. What I'll say quickly, from everything that I can gather, and we're going to talk to Adam Kaplan at the top of the hour, get some of the information that he has as we're a week out from draft night. But this is a situation where the people who seem to be hearing Daniels to Washington are not hearing it directly from Washington. There seems to be a lot of belief around the league from people who are in the league that the Commanders are going to take Daniels, and a lot of that is linking Daniels to what Cliff Kingsbury is going to want. But people do that because it's all the mobility. Kyler Murray and Jaden Daniels are not one and the same. Honestly, I might argue that Drake May's athleticism, Kyler Murray's athleticism, Jaden Daniels' athleticism, Kyler's probably closer to Drake May than, honestly, even Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels is far more Lamar Jackson, and Lamar and Kyler are not, again, one and the same. So my point is, if Cliff Kingsbury wants movement at the quarterback position, he'll still get that in Drake May. It looks like, again, and we did hear the report today, the Commanders are not moving, which is important, right? Now, we get to the third pick, where J.J. McCarthy is far more in play. Today, the Patriots came out and said they are willing to trade out of 3. But how far are they willing to go back, and how much is it going to take to move up are very important things. If we see Drake May go 2, does that also impact what the Patriots do? Does that impact the phone calls that the Patriots ultimately take? There are people who believe the teams that will call the New England to get up to 3 will be interested in J.J. McCarthy. Are those teams going to be interested in Jaden Daniels? Are they interested in Drake May? If the teams that are interested in J.J. McCarthy see Drake May go 2, might they say, we're not in a rush? Because Jaden's going to go next, we can be patient. We don't have to take quarterback here. We'll wait. Make New England draft. We'll call Arizona at 4. We'll call LA at 5. That becomes a bit of the debate and the conversation. But again, as we follow this movement, this is where you see that JJ number at plus 400 look a lot more live, right? 75 to 1, 26 to 1, all the same, is a supreme long shot. 4 to 1 is less of a long shot when you talk about J.J. McCarthy. But what makes betting J.J. McCarthy so difficult is nobody thinks that J.J. McCarthy is seemingly going to be drafted by the team that is presently in the slot they own right now. What do I mean by that? Here's the odds for where a team will or who will select J.J. McCarthy. Minnesota is the favorite at plus 160. People do not believe J.J. is going 11th overall. They believe Minnesota could climb up to 3 and take J.J. McCarthy. New England is the second choice here at plus 300. That would be New England, stand pat, and draft J.J. Then you have the Giants here at 3, at plus 380, which is certainly plausible. But even then, if the Giants are in love with McCarthy, are they going to sit at 6? It's a quarterback. No team has ever traded for their franchise quarterback, hit on the quarterback, and regretted the trade. So if you believe in J.J. McCarthy, you're coming up to either 3 or 4 or even just a quick 6-5 swap if you're the New York Giants. And then Denver sat here at plus 850, drafting 12th overall. The idea is Denver will trade up, maybe 5th with the Chargers. But that is why this over-under 5.5 draft position for McCarthy is so interesting. Unless you think he's going 3rd exactly to New England, you need a trade to hit that bet. The Cardinals and the Chargers are obviously not drafting him. Caleb's a bear, and that Washington flip isn't going to involve J.J. McCarthy. It's going to either be Jaden Daniels or Drake May. The one thing right now that is happening, and I am starting to buy the idea of the Giants drafting quarterback inside this top 6. Here's what I'll say. At home right now, feel free whenever you'd like to do the exercise of the most depressing quarterback situations in football. And when you make that list, I'll make this easy. At the most depressing is the Giants. And then leave a bit of space to figure out the rest of your list. It is by far the least exciting any franchise has right now. At the end of the day, the Browns could tell themselves that somewhere Deshaun Watson has top 10 quarterback play in him. The Tennessee Titans can say, Will Levis has only had a year. What about that comeback in South Beach? Maybe he could be something. And a lot of these other teams that currently don't have quarterbacks are going to leave this draft with quarterbacks, right? The thought is the Raiders and the Broncos and the Vikings are all going to bring guys in through this process. The Giants might need to do the same because their fans, rightfully, eventually figured out that Daniel Jones wasn't the answer. So if the Giants are aware of that, and if you're Brian Dable, and you're Joe Shane, and you're thinking about what we need to do, you need to attach your name to a quarterback. It's this year or next year, but next year's not promised. So they might try to make that move this year. Let's talk now. This quarterback stuff all impacts Rome Odunze. Quick pick, first pick I've made so far in this process is Rome over 8.5. I'll tell you this, draft betting and how you approach it can be very tricky. It depends when you want to jump in. But this is a number that I wanted to jump in now on because not only when I look through these mock drafts is this more often than not a winning ticket, it's something I agree with. If I'm betting a week out, I want to agree with my bet. What do I mean by that? So let's just say, for argument's sake, 1 through 4 are chalk, right? Caleb, Daniels, May, Marvin, we're at 5. That's the Chargers. So now, in order to get inside that top 8, we have to see Rome Odunze either go to the Chargers, the Giants, the Titans, the Falcons, or a trade somewhere. On the board, though, you still have J.J. McCarthy. We just showed you is favored to go into the top 5. Malik Neighbors. There are very few people who would expect Rome Odunze to ever go in front of Malik Neighbors. And Joe Alt, who is minus 350 nearly to go inside the top 7. What that would do, and let's say that's how it goes. JJ at 5 via the trade. Malik Neighbors at 6 to the Giants. That's what the odds say. And Joe Alt at 7, a minus money favorite to go at that spot. All of a sudden, it's the Falcons at 8. Everybody expects Atlanta to draft defense. Yes, Atlanta could trade out. Who is trading up to 8 for Rome Odunze? The Jets, that's a mistake. Sit at 10, wait for Brock Bowers, let that situation play out. The Bears are going to trade up 1 spot in order to bring in Rome Odunze. I don't even think they should be taking wide receiver at 9. They don't have it. I would right now be sprinkling Rome Odunze to not be a top 10 pick. I'm not saying he's not a top 10 talent, but I'm not sure it makes sense for Rome to go to any of these teams that are selecting currently in the top 10. And 11, 12, and 13 are teams that are all tied to quarterback, which can shift things as well. So that's why I'm looking for that Rome Odunze fall right now and taking his over 8.5 draft position, which is currently plus 106. You'll notice here Rome is currently tied. Well, I was going to say last choice. It's not last choice. It's last of the ones that were flashing. But what really stands out, when you look at this, this is the 10th overall pick, a.k.a. the Jets, right? It's Brock Bowers or it's offensive line. That's what the idea is for the Jets at 10. Brock Bowers at last look had an over-under draft position of 12.5. That's become a tempting number for me. That's an option that I'm considering. The Jets at 10, talked to someone who knows the franchise well and made a compelling argument for this pick to make some sense. When you listen to what Woody Johnson has said, right, it is a team that is taking an offensive player, which is why the odds have lined up this direction. But it's also, if the Jets are making it obvious that they want Brock Bowers at 10, what do the Bears do at 9? Call anybody who wants Brock and tell them to come up and jump the Jets. Sometimes you show your hand, you're over excited about it, and that information leaks too easily. It wouldn't stun me if we saw that happen. At 11 is Minnesota, not likely. Wouldn't surprise me if Denver at 12, though, if they're waiting on quarterback, took Brock Bowers. Something to keep tabs on. Quick note. Bo Nix, Michael Penix, the other quarterbacks, if you will. Both right now are plus money to go in the first round. Both, though, have interesting conversations around them that suggest they could possibly go inside the top 15. Stuff we'll talk a little bit with Adam Kaplan about. We're back in a quick moment right here on Game Time Decisions.
Talked about the Otani story. This interpreter, Ipe, clearly was a problem gambler. I mean, he would be identified as that and beyond. Now, there are a lot of others that are out there.
The timing didn't seem great. It seemed slightly tone deaf in terms of, maybe now isn't the time to say it. But the sentiment itself, you have to agree with. There's only so much a sports betting company can do, right?
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Throwbacks in white have now become the main uniforms in black and green as well for Game Green.
Your contracts will be higher in 5 years because the ratings will be through the roof, people. Listen to me. Play games at 7 o'clock. Get more ratings. Make more money. It's simple, but somehow they're imbeciles that make this playoff schedule. I can't figure it out.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
It's when he swung it easy at three-quarter golf swings, and he pretty much hit his number all the time. Dude, but when he hit something full, he hit it 20 yards over the greens at times. He was like, what are you doing?
He's just smiley, happy, and a freakish athlete golf robot that's going to be right there winning majors for the next 10 plus years. It's amazing.
Did you say he was smiling or smiley?
Only on SportsGrid.
They're still the best. They're still the champs. Everyone wants to crown the Celtics the champions, but that's not the way it works. They got to beat them. And, they got to get through the East, which isn't going to be fun to begin with. Everyone thinks it's so automatic.
If it's just Boris is kind of losing his power, if whatever his tactics have been, yeah, move on.
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid. Live right here on SportsGrid, it's Game Time Decisions. In just a couple of moments, we're going to talk to NFL insider Adam Kaplan and talk some NFL draft. And it worked out beautifully because not only is the draft a week away, it is a light night of sports action. I went to the live tab. College baseball. Alabama, Texas A&M. Total 10.5. Is that light? Does that game sizzle on over the number? Gators, Vanderbilt's live right now, 2-all. Vanderbilt minus 152 on that money line. Oh. I'm at home catching 2.5 runs. I sneaky like college baseball. I don't watch it very much. I'm not going to pretend. But when it's on, I don't mind some college baseball. There's not much else live right now. I mean, some Brazilian basketball. You can get Palestiniano minus the 12.5. I don't like that. Looks like too many points. Soccer, what's live right now? Ecuador, Serie A. Got a rout going on over there. Live darts. Let's not pretend we know what's happening. Table tennis. Hockey's going to be starting soon. The first game of the night. That'll be Minnesota and Seattle. And then we start to break into an 8 o'clock window. Winnipeg, Vancouver. A little later on, Calgary, San Jose. Colorado, Edmonton. Vegas, Anaheim. And then you've got LA and Chicago. All staggered start times. That is the opposite of what the NBA does with their regular season finale. The NBA also puts all of their teams in action when they get to the regular season finale. Not the same for the NHL. The NHL does, though, have the same start date for their playoffs, which will be Saturday. And the two games I know we already will have will be the Hurricanes and the Isles, and then Boston and Toronto. And, of course, we will be following that action throughout the weekend, along with the NBA playoffs in Hour 2. We'll talk a little bit about the NBA play-in and some of the movement that is out there over the past few days of action. Maybe we get involved with the Alabama-Texas A&M college baseball game. It could be interesting. In the meantime, we'll take a minute break and then talk to Adam Kaplan as we approach the NFL Draft. That's next. We're live on SportsGrid. It's Game Time Decisions. I'm Kevin Walsh with you here on a Thursday night. 1 week from tonight, the NFL Draft. And with us live and in studio will be NFL insider Adam Kaplan. Adam, excited to talk to you a little bit 1 week out from what is going to be a very busy Thursday.
Yeah, I can't wait, Kevin. This will be, let's see, my 25th year covering the National Football League. It's going to be interesting because everybody wants to know about the quarterbacks, who's going to take them, are they going to drop, and so forth. There are always surprises. Something seems to happen. I'll give an example. 2017 draft here in Philly. So the Bears wind up trading up with the Niners, and we're trying to figure out who in the world could they possibly be trading up for. They need a quarterback. Little did we know it was going to be Mitch Trubisky. It was shocking. Then you go to the second round, third round, years later. The Eagles already extended Carson Wentz's contract. They shocked us by drafting Jalen Hurts, who is going to be Wentz's backup for the future. Who knew that Carson Wentz's career would go down the tubes and Hurts would be their quarterback? So you never know with the NFL draft. They're always going to be surprises.
Yeah, it's the name of the game, Cap. It's the name of the game. And I think the fun thing now with all the draft odds that we have, we get to watch some of the chaos that you've probably grown very accustomed to in the build-up to the draft start to be reflected. One team that could add to the chaos, maybe not, it's the New York Giants. Sitting currently at 6th overall, there are questions amongst the bettors and fans what this team is actually going to do on draft night. The favorite in the market is take wide receiver. Many believe Malik Neighbors of LSU will be on the board, but there are questions about the quarterback position due to Daniel Jones inspiring little to no confidence of anybody that's actually watched Daniel Jones play outside of that playoff game where everyone got hypnotized. Our radio audience is here, by the way, Sirius XM Channel 159, talking to Adam Kaplan, NFL insider, about the draft. Cap, what are you hearing around the New York Giants?
So yeah, I get it. Why? Because what Kevin, what's interesting is clubs do look at mock drafts. They really do. They want to see not only what the mock drafters, the good ones, think of their team, but they want to see what everybody thinks about the other teams in terms of the value and where players will drop. But we go to number 6 with the Giants. See, here's the thing with the quarterback. They're locked into Daniel Jones's contract, $35.5 million fully guaranteed. They can't cut him. Nobody will trade for him. He's coming back to an ACL. They're very hopeful he'll be ready for training camp, but he's coming back from a major injury. As you mentioned, and it's true, very inconsistent career, didn't play well before he got hurt. But the bottom line is that the future quarterback past this season is unclear. In fact, they have to make a decision on his salary next year by the 5th day of free agency, where there's a massive guarantee. So when you really look at it, they don't know who the future past the season is going to be. And quite frankly, the way that Jones has played, you can't think he's going to definitely be the guy this season, despite what he's being paid. But the reason why the odds are at receiver, the two best receivers that are going to, one of the two of them are going to be there. You mentioned Malik Neighbors, who I've got right now for my mock draft at ProFootballNetwork.com. I got Neighbors going 5 to the Chargers if they don't trade out. They've got a leads and receiver. They got a lot of needs, and receiver's number 1 for them. But the Giants need a receiver. They need what's called an X receiver. They need that quote unquote, Kevin, number 1 wide receiver. This is the earliest you could see Rome Odunze, the terrific receiver, play with Michael Penix at Washington. This is the earliest that he would go at number 6. It would not surprise me at all. They have not got a right receiver. They have what I would call a bunch of number 3s. They don't have a true number 1.
Mm-hmm. And that is, I just talked a little bit about the Rome Odunze over-under. That is the trip-up spot for trying to get him over 8.5, is if Neighbors and Marvin Harrison come off of the board inside that top 5, which would be considered a bit of a market upset, but not a massive one. It requires a trade probably to keep Neighbors outside of that top 5. I want to ask you about the Philadelphia Eagles, of course, Cap. You know this team very well. And something that I'm noticing right now is a lot of Cooper DeJean talk, which is always funny when this happens, when a team inside the 20 starts to get heavily linked to one player. Maybe that's fans driving some of that conversation. Are you hearing anything about the Eagles this far out?
Yes, here a couple things. He didn't have a lot of pre-draft visits, but he did visit the Eagles. Now, Kevin, some of the clubs that I've talked to see Cooper DeJean as a safety, not a corner. Yes, he could play corner. He's played it before. He could play outside corner. He could play inside corner. Nickel, free safety. He's also played a little bit of linebacker. He's also a special teams returner, jack of all trades player, phenomenal football player. Probably overall, just in terms of talent and performance from college level, a top 5 talent for this draft. Now, he's coming back from his injury. He ran well on his private pro day, or it was away from the school because they already had theirs. But he had a pro day recently. He ran well. He's recovered from his broken leg. He's ready to go. I have him going somewhere in the 20s. The Eagles do like him, as I understand it. And by the way, the Eagles for the future, they don't need just one. They need 2 outside corners. They need a safety. So, yes, that's why you're hearing the talk of Cooper DeJean going to the Eagles at 22. But I will tell you, Kevin, Howie Roseman, the general manager of the Eagles, he loves to trade up. That's been his big thing. He's traded up a lot in his career since he became the general manager in 2010.
Yeah, it wouldn't stun me if the Eagles upset the market as to what they expect, because a really talented player falls and Howie says, need be damned, let me get the best player. You mentioned we always want to talk about the quarterbacks, right? This draft is kind of tiered off, and the back end of it would be Michael Penix and Bo Nix. I saw something today, Cap, that absolutely floored me. It's mock draft season. I get it. It's silly season. Rarely do I see something and do a quadruple take, and it was Michael Penix 8th overall to the Atlanta Falcons, which would upset every single market possible. What are you hearing around Penix, who is right now plus money to be selected even inside the first round?
Yeah, and by the way, the over-under total for quarterbacks in the first round is 4.5. Right now, I've got it currently at 4. But so I was telling Mike Carver earlier today on Coast to Coast, either Penix or Nix probably will make it in the back of the first round, because every time you think there won't be a lot of quarterbacks go in the first round, a couple guys go in there where you go, wow, I didn't see that happening. Penix, see, here's what I'm told. Clubs are not worried about the fact that he turns 24. Quarterback is not a problem at 24, 25 years old. It's about injury history. It's about ability to process, how you throw the football, size, arm strength. He's a high character guy, great arm strength. He's a decent enough athlete. Great Senior Bowl week. I was there, Kevin. But he's got an injury history. 2 major knee injuries, or in terms of surgery, and shoulder issues. That's why most people in the league don't think he'll go in the first round. But I'm telling you, either Bo Nix out of Oregon or Penix out of Washington is going to go in the back of the first round. Again, it's a quarterback-driven league. Don't pay attention so much to the teams in the back of the first round that need one. Look at those teams trading up early in the second round who need a quarterback that may not get one in the first round. It's just telling you, it happens. It's the most overvalued position in the draft. Something's going to happen.
Getting that extra year on the back end of that contract, Cap, I know you said is always something that matters. NFL Insider, Adam Kaplan, a week from tonight. We're live and in studio. NFL Draft. Can't wait, Cap. We're right back. More Game Time decisions.
Talked about the Ohtani story. This interpreter, Ipe, clearly was a problem gambler. I mean, he would be identified as that and beyond. Now, there are a lot of others that are out there.
The timing didn't seem great. It seemed slightly tone deaf in terms of, maybe now isn't the time to say it. But the sentiment itself, you have to agree with. There's only so much a sports betting company can do, right?
Newswire. only on SportsGrid.
Throwbacks in white have now become the main uniforms in black and green as well. 4-game green.
Your contracts will be higher in 5 years because the ratings will be through the roof, people. Listen to me. Play games at 7 o'clock. Get more ratings. Make more money. It's simple, but somehow they're imbeciles that make this playoff schedule. I can't figure it out.
The line only on SportsGrid.
It's when he swung it easy at three-quarter golf swings, and he pretty much hit his number all the time. Dude, but when he hit something full, he hit it 20 yards over the greens at times. He was like, what are you doing?
He's just smiley, happy, and a freakish athlete golf robot that's going to be right there winning majors for the next 10 plus years. It's amazing.
Did you say he was smiling or smiley?
Only on SportsGrid.
I mean, they're still the best. They're still the champs. Everyone wants to crown the Celtics the champions, but that's not the way it works. They got to beat them. And, they got to get through the East, which isn't going to be fun to begin with. Everyone thinks it's so automatic.
If it's just Boris is kind of losing his power, if whatever his tactics have been, yeah, move on.
Pharrell Coast to Coast. Only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're gonna go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's gonna help me get the job done. There is not gonna be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid. We're back right here on Game Time Decisions. Kevin Walsh with you on a Thursday night. Tomorrow, Joe Ranieri will be handling business, which means I will not be here for your NBA play-in situations. You can find me on Twitter at @TheKevinWalsh. Any action that'll be on, you can find there. Here's one really big thing to keep tabs of, and we'll see if any of this is out already. But it's going to be Brandon Ingram and what the markets look to do with his props. Right now, that number is out at 20.5, which is a bump up from last game where he had a pregame number, I believe, at 18.5. We mentioned that points, rebounds, and assist prop for him, which I took a chance on, was listed at 28.5. Funny enough, a lot of people feel like BI's 23 minutes was actually less minutes restriction and more playing terribly. And if you look at Brandon Ingram just through the plus-minus lens, a minus 28, there was a moment this game was tied. Okay, like I know, well, that's the last, excuse me, Brandon Ingram was a minus 28. I'll find the playing game in a moment. But look, New Orleans and Brandon Ingram really, that was not the game that they needed out of him. I'm pulling up his plus-minus now. Yes, a minus 16 in that game in 25 minutes was terrible. He scored 11 points, had 4 rebounds and 4 assists. He contributed a bit in the other categories there, but that is just, for that team on that night, they needed a lot more from BI, and they didn't get it. And now you go into the Zion list, Pelicans, and what can you get out of Brandon Ingram? Is it true that BI sat there for only 25 minutes because he wasn't good enough to earn another 5, 6 or so? Or is that where Brandon Ingram was capped on Tuesday? If that's where he was capped, what's his minutes available-wise look like for Friday? Now, you would imagine Brandon Ingram can play better. Brandon Ingram might not be a top 20 guy in this league, but Brandon Ingram is better than the 4 for 12 that he gave that basketball team on Tuesday. 20.5 is the points prop, though. You're not getting a cheap number for a guy who's played 2 games in a month and has not looked excellent really in either one of them. Up against Sacramento, there should be points available for BI, but it makes for a really intriguing situation. We'll go back to the NBA in a moment, but I do want to throw it over to Davis Maddock. Tonight, the baseball board, I'm sure people looking to get involved late night with Giants D-backs. Here's what Davis Maddock is looking for, same-game parlay.
All right, guys, we are back with another same-game parlay. Over on the FanDuel Sportsbook, we have the final game of the night in Major League Baseball. Ryan Nelson and the Arizona Diamondbacks facing off against Logan Webb and the San Francisco Giants. We're taking the Diamondbacks on the underdog money line. Not a believer in this Island of Misfit Toys Giants lineup, and I am a believer in the Arizona Diamondbacks offense. Not so much a belief in Ryan Nelson, who I don't expect to do that well here. I think the Diamondbacks should be able to get to our guy, Logan Webb. And our second leg of our same-game parlay, we're juicing it up with a home run. We're taking Jock Peterson to hit a home run, career 227 isolated slugging, only a 2% K rate this year. Obviously, he will strike out more, following up a 13% walk rate last season. I think Jock has gotten a lot better at the plate, and he was put on this earth to do one thing, and that is hit home runs. So Arizona Diamondbacks money line and Jock Peterson to hit a home run, that gives us a juicy plus 1,115 odds on the FanDuel Sportsbook. Good luck tonight, everybody.
All right, there we go. A little SGP action there from Davis Maddock. I'm betting each team to score 2 runs in that game through 7 innings. Minus 110, not a bad price. Quickly to circle back within the NBA, and we hit this a little bit on the top, that Jimmy Butler news and what that's done to the market. The Boston Celtics are minus 220. Boston has not played an important game in forever. And all that's happened is his number has continuously grown in their favor. Everything has been able to break right for Boston, truly, in the lead up to the Eastern Conference playoffs. A lot of people believe Milwaukee could be a bad matchup for them. Well, Milwaukee, 1, can't get out of their own way, and 2, Giannis, we don't know, right? Okay, miss a game, miss 2, that might be enough. Philly is supposed to be the second biggest challenge, I think, just because of how good they were this season with healthy Embiid. He was going to win MVP. He might have won it unanimously. That's how good the season Embiid was having, legitimately, if he stayed on that pace. Well, he doesn't look awesome, right? Maybe it's an overreaction from the play-in game, but it wasn't great. There's probably some value on Embiid overs when we get to Saturday, but we'll get there when we get there. But Embiid's not in their bracket. They max out at playing one of Milwaukee or Philly, and they may not play either one. It's not a slight to the Knicks or the Pacers, but the Celtics' price in those series will be monstrous. And then you get the Miami bit of this. The Heat may not even make it to that series. Early lean for me is they will beat the Bulls, but no Jimmy Butler. Look, a 1 versus 8 isn't supposed to really be tight as is. The Celtics were getting some tough luck, probably, by drawing Miami. And it's now turned into a situation where the Heat will cover, right, a few of those games. They'll have a fourth quarter lead. But if Miami is swept, who would be surprised? Who would blame them? I guess you'd say Spo isn't getting swept, but still, okay. This is a Miami Heat team that has battled the Boston Celtics for a spot in the NBA Finals for some years now, right? I mean, if you just kind of go back through it, those teams went head-to-head in the Eastern Conference Finals in the bubble. Those teams went head-to-head in the Eastern Conference Finals the year Boston came out on top and ended up playing the Warriors, and those teams went head-to-head last year in the conference finals. In a 7-game series that started Miami 3-0, went back to Boston 3-3, and Miami won Game 7 on the Celtics' home court. The Celtics get none of this now Because without Jimmy, they're obviously not the same team. I'm not saying Miami's a walkover, but still, they're missing their best player. And if anything, that's maybe the best way to put this. Go through right now the Bucks' best player, injured. Philly's best player, injured. The Knicks' best player is healthy, but their second best player is out for the season. The Cavs' best player, injured, in Donovan Mitchell. The Pacers, okay, they're healthy. The Heat's best player, out in Jimmy Butler. Like, I know part of the conversation is the East is bad, but a real big part of the conversation is the East is a mess. Because everybody's hurt, and Boston's basically not. You know, there's people who say, well, what if Kristaps gets injured along the way? Oh, and then what? They're still going to be the healthiest group of the bunch. Tatum could miss a series. They'd still be favored. They would. Tatum could miss a series. They'd still be favored over any of these teams. It's why the Boston number is what it is. And can Boston, finish the deal? Look, whoever gets to that conference finals is obviously going to be playing some tough basketball or great basketball, but that's probably not even the point. It's probably a bigger situation of who comes out of the West. Denver right now is a favorite at plus 140. I can't find a Celtics fan that thinks they'll beat Denver, which is hilarious. Whoever comes out of the West is going to obviously feel very threatening. OKC, we won't talk about youth anymore. Dallas would have the best player in the series. Phoenix would have the two best players in the series. Minnesota would have delivered on a lot of promise. The Clippers won't be there, obviously. Kawhi questionable for game one. I mean, that's just a whole big pile of I told you so, isn't it? That's all right. We'll handle that on Saturday. We will. It's a lot's going to develop here. And, of course, we're going to be covering it throughout on SportsGrid as well as the NFL Draft. That's next. Mike Blewett checks in here at Game Time Decisions.
Talked about the Ohtani story. This interpreter, Ipe, clearly was a problem gambler. I mean, he would be identified as that and beyond. Now, there are a lot of others that are out there.
The timing didn't seem great. It seemed slightly tone deaf in terms of, maybe now isn't the time to say it. But the sentiment itself, you have to agree with. There's only so much a sports betting company can do, right?
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Throwbacks in white have now become the main uniforms in black and green as well. 4-game green.
Your contracts will be higher in 5 years because the ratings will be through the roof, people. Listen to me. Play games at 7 o'clock. Get more ratings. Make more money. It's simple, but somehow they're imbeciles that make this playoff schedule. I can't figure it out.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
It's when he swung it easy at three-quarter golf swings, and he pretty much hit his number all the time. Dude, but when he hit something full, he hit it 20 yards over the greens at times. He was like, what are you doing?
He's just smiley, happy, and a freakish athlete golf robot that's going to be right there winning majors for the next 10-plus years. It's amazing.
Did you say he was smiling or smiley?
Only on SportsGrid.
They're still the best. They're still the champs. Everyone wants to crown the Celtics the champions, but that's not the way it works. They got to beat them. And, they got to get through the East, which isn't going to be fun to begin with. Everyone thinks it's so automatic.
If it's just Boris is kind of losing his power, if whatever his tactics have been, move on.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night, I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid. All right, let's make it happen. We're live right here. It's Game Time Decisions. Mike Blewett, arguably the most difficult man to track down in all of sports media. It makes his appearance here on Game Time Decisions. Mike, happy to have you. How are you?
I'm great. I admit, a little tough to track me down lately. I've been in a lot of different states.
Yep.
College basketball season is over, so I'm going to try and keep it to the tri-state area for the time being, but this can change on a moment's notice. So sorry we didn't catch up while I was in Phoenix. I enjoyed myself there. I hope it's not there again for a long time. A lot of time in cars getting around Phoenix for the Final Four.
I could imagine. So look, Mike, of course, next week we're live in studio coverage. I believe Mike will be live with Friday as well. Kind of leading us through rounds 2 and 3. So excited to check in with Mike, and we'll check it again. I guess ironic for me to say after I just said it's hard to track Mike down. I hope we'll check in again with Mike before we get to next Thursday. I want to start at 5, though, Blue, because, look, 1, 2, 3, 4, I get it, but 5 is kind of the swing point if you look at the market, right? Yep. There's a minus money favorite for the first, second, third, and fourth pick, and then at 5, the odds are kind of saying, I don't know. We think the Chargers would take Neighbors if they're there. We know they'd take Marvin Harrison if he's there. I guess they could take Joe Alt. Oh, by the way, maybe they'll trade out for the team that wants J.J. McCarthy. It's a real guessing game at 5. Mike, do you have any read at the moment on what the Chargers are going to do?
I think your intuition is right. And, the best part about the lead up to the draft is there's hardly any information rattling around in your head at this point, right? You've only read 1,000 articles and listened to just as many podcasts trying to get a sense of what teams are trying to do. I think the interesting parts of it are people talking about trades right there, right? Minnesota, can they come up and get somebody that they need? Does anybody do anything creative like that at 4, at 5? Minnesota, Denver, obviously the teams you're going to be looking at. And the Chargers, and here's why I think it's really interesting. I know the Giants don't have any really much reputation for doing this at all, although I think Joe Shane is really a departure from some of their historic ways. But the Chargers and the Giants both need a lot of help. They happen to both need help at receiver, but they've jettisoned a lot of players. And if you look up and down the roster, the Chargers are set at quarterback. The Giants are not. But wouldn't it behoove both of those teams to potentially trade back? I don't think Harrison's getting there. If I'm the Cardinals, I'm not going to get cute about it. I think there's a world in which people could move there if they give them a haul. But I think Marvin Harrison, to me, is the best player in the draft. I'm sure some people disagree. I think he's the easiest pick to make. If I'm the Cardinals, I just sit there and take him. But I think it's fascinating only because the trade possibilities make this a very different draft, right? Is it J.J. McCarthy right there?
Yeah. Are
all these Bo Nix rumors that you and I have talked about, do they really come to fruition? I don't think they will, but it's certainly a possibility. The Giants are in such desperate need for receiver too, right after the Chargers, that it makes sense for them to take a Malik Neighbors if he's there. or for the Chargers' sake, Malik Neighbors if he's there. But both teams need so much. If I'm the Giants and Neighbors goes at 5, just trade back and get more picks. That's where my head would be at.
So, again, I think what's interesting is the Chargers trading back contingent on one of the top 4 quarterbacks being on the board?
Yeah, to me,
I feel like the answer to that is yes, right? Yeah. But again, what that means if all 4 go, that means they will just sit there and draft Marvin. So that's why, again, it's hard for me to get there with the Malik Neighbors situation.
Yeah.
And I'm tempted to, at 6, the Neighbors price. But Mike, I did, and you and I can't do this now on air, but I yesterday did one of our famous quarterback exercises off air of the most depressing quarterback situations in football. Mm-hmm. And the Giants are first by a ridiculous amount. Yeah. Mike, you can text me later if you do the exercise on your own, but I'd be interested who you think is second and third. I just know the Giants are first. And do you really willingly walk into this season offering your fan base nothing? Because nobody's even trying to sell, maybe Daniel Jones will bounce back. Giants fans have given up. The only positive thing Giants fans will say is, this is the last year of Daniel Jones. So I know they could draft one next year, Mike, but this would be the most dead man walking season I could remember in some time. With a quarterback that's actually making money, I'm just curious what you think of the Giants at 6, potentially going quarterback, trade up, or maybe even sit there.
Drew Lock is obviously, to your point, nothing they're going to get excited about. We don't know really at this moment, Kev, if Daniel Jones can even hack it anymore, right? We're not talking about him
ACL doesn't help.
Torn ACL. We're not talking about just that. Neck injuries and everything else are putting his career in jeopardy. Ironically, you're talking about a dead man walking season. The Steelers were kind of walking into that, Kev, when they drafted Kenny Pickett. Like if they had said, he's not really a first-round grade, let's just wait. They didn't. They knew they couldn't. They weren't going to roll in with Mason Rudolph and at the time, maybe it was Duck Hodges backing him up. They weren't going to do that. I'm sure they could have worked on a Josh Dobbs situation there. But you're right. This is a dead man walking scenario. But at least they have guys with NFL experience. It's a really tough position to be in. I would go for the Hall, but then you'd have to trust that somewhere along the line you can get Bo Nix or Michael Penix if you think that they are capable of starting in year one. We talked obviously off air about players with a lot of experience in college, and Bo Nix is certainly one of them, but you'd really have to consider what your grade is of him before the Giants start moving things around.
Yeah, I'll say this, and I think we're starting to see some of the movement back to Drake May. If you made me bet it today, I'd bet Drake goes to. If you're the Giants, we know this fan base very well, Mike, obviously being right here.
Yep.
Do whatever it takes to get Jaden. The fans will be elated. They will be absolutely elated. And Brian Dable, here's the thing. I talk about this when we do the NBA draft shows. Like, Jaime Jaquez is not a guy I thought highly of. Miami drafted him. I changed my opinion now because the Heat drafted him, and that changes how things play out. Jaden Daniels, I'm not going to be as high on as everybody else. If Brian Dable gets to work with him from day one, that can kind of change the perception then of how this plays out. Let me stick with this quickly, Mike.
Do you feel that way about J.J. McCarthy? I didn't mean to talk over you. Do you feel that way about J.J. McCarthy, that if somebody like Dable is able to work with J.J. McCarthy, then that changes your opinion of what his trajectory could be?
Yeah, a bit, right? I think the intrigue on Jaden over JJ specifically in New York is, since they wouldn't be taking the wide receiver they desperately need, Daniels' ability with his legs is so much greater than McCarthy. That will help year one. Jaden Daniels, to me, is a very interesting situation where I might bet him to win Rookie of the Year and still think he's going to bust.
because of the rushing numbers
Opportunity.
he's going to be able to put up in his opening season. Brock Bowers, I talked about him a little bit early on in today's show, but really kind of the gap between Brock and the second best guy at his position is maybe the biggest in this draft, depending on who you asked. You feel confident that Brock is inside that top 12?
Yeah, I feel good about Brock right now. I think there's a couple of teams that will not let him go. I know the Jets and the Broncos are the two strongest rumors, and I think those are strong enough possibilities that I don't think anybody's going to let a playmaker like that get outside of the top 12. So I think I know you're paying a little bit of juice for it, but I think he's under the 12.5 that's posted right now.
Yeah, I think one thing, and look, everyone, it's all how you want to bet the draft, right? Getting what do you get? What are you getting right now for him to go inside that top 10? Let me see right here. You're getting plus 160.
What's that, plus 160?
Plus 160. But
So
he can go 11th and 12th.
Yeah.
He can go 11th and 12th. Absolutely. Because Minnesota might have traded out, right? In that scenario, if the Cardinals or the Patriots or the Chargers are sitting there at 11, I think they'd all consider Brock Bowers. And Denver at 12, if they're not taking quarterback, Mike, Sean Payton saying, yeah, I'll take the best player. If Marvin, Caleb, Brock Bowers are maybe like the three most exciting players for get position from the class, I could see Sean Payton being interested in that.
Hell yeah. And they're another team that is a long way to go. These are jettisoning defensive all-pro players because it's a safety. So we don't want to pay them that much. Okay. What are you doing with the extra money? Your team stinks now. So they need a lot. The Giants need a lot. Chargers need a lot. One other one, a couple of offensive linemen, Ola Fashanu and Troy Fatuanu, both set at 14.5. I think they both go inside that top 15.
Yeah, I think the tackle position is supposed to really fill up between 7 and call it 15. So I think that makes a lot of sense. Mike, we'll talk more of the draft a week away. Dave Sharapan up next.
Talked about the Otani story. This interpreter, Ipe, clearly was a problem gambler. I mean, he would be identified as that and beyond. Now, there are a lot of others that are out there.
The timing didn't seem great. It seemed slightly tone deaf in terms of, maybe now isn't the time to say it. But the sentiment itself, you have to agree with. There's only so much a sports betting company can do, right?
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Throwbacks in white have now become the main uniforms in black and green as well. 4-game green.
Your contracts will be higher in 5 years because the ratings will be through the roof, people. Listen to me. Play games at 7 o'clock. Get more ratings. Make more money. It's simple, but somehow they're imbeciles that make this playoff schedule. I can't figure it out.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
It's when he swung it easy at three-quarter golf swings, and he pretty much hit his number all the time. Dude, but when he hit something full, he hit it 20 yards over the greens at times. He was like, what are you doing?
He's just smiley, happy, and a freakish athlete golf robot that's going to be right there winning majors for the next 10-plus years. It's amazing.
Did you say he was smiling or smiley?
Only on SportsGrid.
They're still the best. They're still the champs. Everyone wants to crown the Celtics the champions, but that's not the way it works. They got to beat them. And, they got to get through the East, which isn't going to be fun to begin with. Everyone thinks it's so automatic.
If it's just Boris is kind of losing his power, if whatever his tactics have been, move on.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to game time decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're gonna go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's gonna help me get the job done. There is not gonna be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid. Live right here on SportsGrid. It's a Thursday night. I'm Kevin Walsh. I'm joined by Dave Sharapan out there in Vegas. He's got the home gear on tonight. How's it going, Consig?
It's good. We got rain out tonight with the Cubs. I was all ready to have that one teed up for you. So Arizona and San Francisco is the only thing going on other than the last night of hockey season, which isn't the same as the last day of the NBA season. That is a silly day.
No.
Trying to book those games and bet those games is a whole different beast. Thank goodness those only come around once a year. But there's a couple games, hockey guy, things going on. But we're just chilling, K-Dub. I enjoyed the last segment with you and Blewett. That was really good. You're starting to really dive in deep with that draft stuff. I love it.
Yeah, we're a week away. There's a lot you got to work through. I think for me, the draft is... So let me say this to people out there who are betting the draft. And Dave and I have always talked about this. Betting the draft has always been difficult for me as it pertains to units. Because if tomorrow Heat Bulls, right? Yep. And I give you this impassioned breakdown on why the Heat will win the game, at the end of the day, they're going to play the game. And anything can happen. Chicago could get hot. An injury. We've seen those, unfortunately, a ton in the play-in.
Mm-hmm.
And when it gets to the draft, that's not what's happening.
Nope.
We're betting on a correct answer. And the idea is you have the answer. Occasionally. Not always, but there are certain things that you look and you go, I have this answer. Right? And there are sometimes, occasionally, when a reporter will actively tell you the answer, it appears, right? And I'm just sharing this because maybe some people can relate to that, where it's like, well, if this is just 100% exactly what's going to happen, right? Why am I hesitating? Why am I not going for it? The thing is, draft stuff is crazy. And I think people are seeing that a bit today, Dave, with this number 2 overall pick move. Because we know there's always a weird move come the draft, and it's not happening at 1. So it's going to happen at 2 between Jaden Daniels and Drake May.
You're 100% right. This is one of those things that, listen, it took a little while to learn how to move these numbers and try to get money on the other side. The problem is the draft. You can move the Bulls number or the Heat number to a certain point, and a bad guy or a bot or somebody's going to play it. The problem with the draft betting is if they know Drake May is the guy and you move it and they bet it again and they move it and you bet it again and you go, uh-oh, like now what do we do? It's not fun. So you don't get to – there's no two-way action on the draft. It's a very unique market. Now, picking a position, like will the third pick of the draft be an offensive tackle? Yes, no. At least you can work with that. Now, there's a lot of guys that have it kind of mapped out. If 1 happens, then 2 happens. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. I forget what – is that the Pythagorean theorem? I can't remember what it is. But if A and B happen, then C happens, and you can find it, a good way to bet it. So, listen, the book plays defense just in general. Draft week, man, you need a vacation. after draft week in the book. There's just too much, especially now with this. All these books offer all these different markets, and there's guys like you scouring these markets, looking for the content, taking little shots here and there. You let the people know, then it's all over.
And I said, today I made my first draft bet, and it's relatively, again, everybody's different, right? Call it light, right? I took a position on Roma Dunze over 8.5.
Oh.
And part of that is the mock drafts, right? But it's also, if I'm betting it a week out, which is still even a bit far, I have to agree. Like, I think the Patriots at 3 should just draft Marvin Harrison Jr., right? But they're not going to do that. That's not what's happening. They're either taking a quarterback or trading out so somebody else can take a quarterback. Nobody is suggesting they will take Marvin Harrison Jr., right? Another example is the fact that Jaden Daniels is minus 200 to go 2 right now. And there's a lot of people that believe that's what's going to happen. But I don't agree with that. I wouldn't do that. So I'm not going to lay the minus 200 right now because I'm already uncomfortable enough with that notion. And the information isn't strong enough kind of at this point in time.
Right.
There's a lot of dancing that has to be done. Again, it makes the draft really interesting. I wonder, I wonder how, I wonder how, if this 2 market moves, how much does that change 3? And what I mean more so is a lot of people think that if Jaden goes 2, teams could trade up for J.J. McCarthy at 3, and that would lead to Drake May fall.
Yes.
If Drake May goes 2, does that mean that Jaden Daniels is 100% going 3, and then all of a sudden J.J. falls? Has an over-under draft position of 5.5.
Are 5 quarterbacks getting taken in the first round?
I saw something, I mentioned this earlier in the show today, that Jonathan Jones of CBS, by the way, this isn't a slight. Jonathan Jones has covered this league for many years. Jonathan Jones talks to, I'm sure, plenty of people, more than me, said Michael Penix will be selected inside the first 12 picks.
Wow.
Just to give,
hadn't heard that one yet.
Just to give people an idea, Michael Penix to be a top 10 pick is 37-1 right now.
Wow.
All right.
I
to
trust
be a
that
first
a little bit
round,
more, no disrespect,
than
the guy you just said.
To be a first round pick, he's now minus 140. That number's moved. But this is a perfect example, right? Legit reporter believes Michael Penix will go inside the top 12. Is there a world where that guy is so wrong? He goes 37th and he doesn't go inside the first round? That's really, really wrong. Right? And what I'm saying is, when it comes to the draft, minus 140 for Penix to go in the first round, and I'm just looking here immediately on FanDuel, minus 140, there were people tonight betting Giants minus 140. In fact, they're betting minus 150s.
I like Logan Webb.
Logan Webb might get blown up.
He could, but I like Logan Webb. I like Logan Webb tonight. I do.
I agree. But you see what I'm like? That's where the draft just gets so fascinating. Penix to go in the first round at the end of the day. If you know that.
There's so many moves to make, but like, I would rather sit tight, maybe take a bet before I move anything. But if I take a second bet, that's when those numbers got to move. Now, will someone bet it based on that report? Maybe. Will they bet it for the limit? Probably not, because there's a lot of false reports put out. This is where the first year that I ever did this, they're like, all right, look, we got to really put up all these props. And I just resisted it. I'm like, can I just watch the baseball, please? Let me do the hockey numbers with, Tommy and work on basketball prices. And it was like, no, we need everybody to do the numbers with the, at least the first round and all this other stuff. And it was just nonstop reading, nonstop, trying to reach out and, get reports from people who were actually saying it. And when you hear that, like you just said, K-Dub, that's a gigantic disparity. I don't know how to price that. Inside the top 12, not in the first round. What are we doing? I have no idea where to put those numbers. It's very, very difficult.
Yeah, and again, I just think it's so.
That being said, he ain't going in the first 12, is he?
No. Here's what doesn't make any sense. I'll tell people about the first 12, okay? Inside the first 12 is Minnesota and Denver. On top of that, Chicago, Washington, New England, the Giants.
Oh.
So you have 6 teams linked to quarterback inside the top 12.
Ooh.
You want to add the Raiders at 13? We can. That's 7. That's more than half of the first 13 picks have been linked to quarterback. We have an over-under draft position of 4.5 in the first round. But here's the thing. In recent years, I feel like teams stopped getting super desperate and trading up. Like, they'll fall. The guy in front of me doesn't need quarterback. And all of a sudden, J.J. McCarthy does go to Minnesota at 11.
Right.
And not 4. And it kind of changes everything. I want to ask you something quickly. We won't spend much time on it. I'm sure you've talked about it. Speaking of having the answers, Jonte Porter, I'm just curious out there in Vegas, what the reactions you heard from people around Jonte Porter and his lifetime ban from the NBA because he was giving it, I think, more than not just betting on the NBA, but giving information to people in relation to his performances.
Well, I think that we're going to come into these situations a lot more frequently with the proliferation of legal sports wagering. So that being said, if you and I were in a room and we're sitting there with the risk monitors up and we're doing our thing, and a bet comes across for 80 dimes to lose $1.1 million, I turn to you and say, K-Dub, do you know this guy? Who is this guy? What is he trying to bet? Oh, 3 unders on a fringe player? Yeah, we're going to make a phone call and find out this is probably not going to happen. So I'm seeing it from the back end going, how did this bet even get through? And going, all right, immediately upon either if I'm in the restroom and you hit accept and you're the new guy and I go, well, why would you do that? All right, we can't blow $1.1 million on a 3-game item prop on a Tuesday on Jonte Porter. So now, we would open up a question and answer session, investigation, and go, something's up. I mean, they weren't disguising what they were doing. You could have done this 100 times for a dime a piece, maybe, and gotten away with it. It might have not set off all the flags that it did. All that being said, I don't think Commissioner Adam Silver had anything to do but do that. You have to make it known that you cannot do this. So, people saying, oh, you could get a year suspension. Guys gambled in the NFL, got a year suspension. It's apples and oranges. There's too many other things.
Agree.
And, the guys that I talk to out here are going, there's not a book in this desert that would have even thought about accepting that bet. Not one.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think the thing that I just keep trying to remind people, you're right, Dave, it's more accessible than ever. But it is also easier to figure out when things like this happen. And I just will continue to say this because there's outside noise from places that don't understand this stuff enough. People are like, oh, the NBA should stop being a partner with FanDuel. What is that going to fix? That is not going to fix anything. That it is FanDuel or DraftKings who is able to catch these things. It's interesting. We'll get the best bet on the way out.
Talked about the Otani story. This interpreter Ipe, clearly was a problem gambler. I mean, he would be identified as that and beyond. Now, there are a lot of others that are out there.
The timing didn't seem great. It seemed slightly tone deaf in terms of, maybe now isn't the time to say it, but the sentiment itself, you have to agree with. There's only so much a sports betting company can do, right?
Newswire, only on SportsGrid.
Throwbacks in white have now become the main uniforms in black and green as well. 4-game green.
Your contracts will be higher in 5 years because the ratings will be through the roof, people. Listen to me. Play games at 7 o'clock. Get more ratings. Make more money. It's simple, but somehow they're imbeciles that make this playoff schedule. I can't figure it out.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
It's when he swung it easy at three-quarter golf swings, and he pretty much hit his number all the time. Dude, but when he hit something full, he hit it 20 yards over the greens at times. He was like, what are you doing?
He's just smiley, happy, and a freakish athlete golf robot that's going to be right there winning majors for the next 10-plus years. It's amazing.
Did you say he was smiling or smiley?
Only on SportsGrid.
They're still the best. They're still the champs. Everyone wants to crown the Celtics the champions, but that's not the way it works. They got to beat them. And, they got to get through the East, which isn't going to be fun to begin with. Everyone thinks it's so automatic.
If it's just Boris is kind of losing his power, if whatever his tactics have been, yeah, move on.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're gonna go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's gonna help me get the job done. There is not gonna be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid. Closing out Game Time Decisions. Kevin Walsh with you on a Thursday night. Up next will be In-Game Live. Tomorrow, Joe Ranieri will steer the ship here on SportsGrid. Saturday live at 11 a.m. And that will be the true beginning of the NBA's postseason. It will be a can't-miss show as we will, of course, go through the 4 games that you are getting Saturday, but also series-long wagers, top point scorer, top rebounder, perhaps a team minus a half a game, plus a half a game. We're going to go through all of that on Saturday, as well as the beginning of the NHL playoffs. And, of course, Joe Madden will help us there. We'll do some RBC with Brady Cannon as well. So make sure you are locked in because it is a huge weekend of sports for us here on SportsGrid. And you're not going to want to miss any of that coverage live at 11 a.m. with Game Time Decisions. Closing out tonight's show, a best bet from an NL West showdown between the Giants and the Diamondbacks, and the divisional aspect of this is key. I'm taking both teams to score 2 or more runs through the first 7 innings at a minus 110 price. Dave mentions liking Logan Webb. Same here. Logan Webb and the Giants at around minus 155 at home is a bit tempting overall. They're 3-3 this season at home. They've struggled on the road. The Diamondbacks are 2-4 outside of the desert. So a road game. Again, I get the number. But at times I worry about
the interdivision matchups. And this is a Diamondbacks lineup that has a lot of familiarity with Logan Webb. He has one start outside of the division. He only gave up one earned run. The other starts, 2 or more. That's what we're looking for. And I don't think the Giants will have much issue getting to Nelson a bit, coming off of his best start of the season. I think due for a little bit of a regression, bounce back the other way, sell high spot. So at -110, both teams to have 2 on the board through the first 7 innings. Of course, tonight the NHL regular season comes to a close, and In-Game Live will be following that and more, which is next right here on SportsGrid.